winning those games always matters. I say to every kid when I was teaching, when I'd see a football player, I say, let's win tomorrow. The turkey tastes better after we beat Medfield. It really does.
Well, we were lucky that we had Mr. Wakely and Mr. Marlborough here for so many years. They were just fantastic administrators. And both, obviously, you probably don't know Mr. Wakely, but you've talked to Mr. Marlborough, and he was a football coach. And Mr. Wakely was just as involved with athletics. In fact, that's one of the reasons the gym was named after him. So the support administratively was just unbelievable, and that made my job that much easier because I knew they had their support, and that was one thing about just the school in general. Mr. Wakely and Mr. Mark, they had the foresight to hire people to be department heads, and they allowed the department head to do their job without micromanaging. So the support administratively was unbelievable.
And fortunately, my mentor, Mr. Richard Wakely, who unfortunately has been deceased now, I believe, for 14 years, he was the person who guided the school into becoming the school that it has become. He was the man who fought for the budgets. And some of you probably, when you go into the gymnasium, you probably wonder sometimes, I wonder who this Wakely fellow was. Well, he was the person that, his background, he was a coach also, and his love was basketball. And it was very fitting because he didn't miss too many basketball games that were played in the Dover Sherburne gym while he was tenured here at Dover Sherburne. And when he retired, that gymnasium was named after him. And he and I were best friends on top of it. We got along very well and all, but he's one of the main reasons Dover Sherburne is considered to be one of the best schools, not only in best public schools in the state, but in the country. And being the assistant principal, I had gone to get a master's degree in educational administration, and when the opportunity availed itself, I was fortunate enough to get that position. And it took me a couple of years to sort of come to grips and be able to deal with that, so that I realized I was making a contribution to making the school work. And somehow or other in the process, one of my football players had nicknamed me The Rock. And I became known as The Rock most of the time I was here in school. I recognized that I had a very different job to do as assistant headmaster, and I worked very hard at it to try to make my contribution to make this the school that it eventually became.
I played football my junior and senior year, so that would have been 1970, 71, and then 71, 72. I graduated in the class of 72. I then came back in 1977 in the fall when I began my teaching career, and I taught for 41 years. And I had 2 stints as a football coach. In fact, I got my teaching job because I came back and substitute taught, and then I was an assistant football coach, and then I happened to be here, and that's how I got the teaching job. So I coached 3 years. I got to coach my brother, which was pretty cool. And then I coached again with Coach Harry Rose, who I played with during the 90s. That's the best I can do. In 41 years, you kind of lose track of some of the exact dates. So, but I coached with him for 4 additional years later. So 7 total years of coaching football. Okay, well, in order for a rivalry to be a rivalry, the teams themselves must be rivals, which means that they have to be somewhat close. So in the beginning, we had games with Medfield, but I wouldn't call it rivalry games because the scores were not the kind of scores that indicated there was real competition going on.
Medfield, I believe, was undefeated. We were, we had no victories at all. We hadn't had a victory in the two years that I had been here as an assistant coach. And quite honestly, playing a Thanksgiving Day game, and the first Thanksgiving Day game was a big thing for us, even though realistically we didn't have a chance to win. We were not a good football team. They were outstanding. But I wanted to do something because I told them when I spoke to them that they were a special team because no matter what, when they came back to visit, when they were adults and everything, they were going to come back, and they were the only ones that were going to be able to say, I played in the inauguration Medfield Dover Sherburne game. And I said, I'm not telling you to do anything but to play as hard as you can for as long as you can. Whether it's one period or two periods, I want you to really, really play as hard as you can. And with that, from behind me, I picked up a baseball bat and I took a few swings at the bucket that happened to be in the locker room, and I gave it a few whacks. And I said, fellas, play as hard as you can for as long as you can. And they did. As a matter of fact, unbeaten Medfield only scored late in the first quarter. But of course, we ran out of gas and we did lose the game. But the rivalry was started.
We all look so forward to playing high school football here at Dover Sherburne. You know, we followed it growing up, and Coach Marlborough was he was great. He was tough. It was no nonsense, but we enjoyed playing for him. Looking back, I really enjoyed it. But he was tough. He was as they say, no nonsense.
So in the first few years, we struggled. Then my junior year was actually the first year that we beat them. We went into the Thanksgiving game with the winner of that game being guaranteed at least a third of the Tri-Valley League title. In both years that our school has won league championships, there have been tri-champs that year, which is something of an anomaly, I believe. So it was a real big game, and that was when it really became a rivalry. Once we beat them, it became a really good rivalry. And each team will tend to go through periods of time when one will be a little more consistently better than the other. And there have been some great upsets over the years and some wild games. So I think since we won a couple of games, that's really when it became a rivalry.
The team of 1970 was playing Medfield for a piece of the championship. If we won and a couple of other teams won, we would share the Tri-Valley League championship. That was a big game, and it was played on an icy field, and we had a terrific passing attack that the field did not really allow us to use all of the weapons we had. And fortunately, we also had a terrific ground quarterback too. We had some really good skilled athletes on that team. And we did go to the ground, and we did eke out a victory in the game. And As I say, that was the first football championship that we ever had.
Harry Rose, well, first of all, one of the best athletes ever to go through Dover Sherburne. He could throw, like he was a great baseball player. He's a professional golfer now. He made things look really easy. So he and I happened to be in the same class. We were rivals at first, and then we just kind of learned how to play together. He threw and I caught. It was kind of nice. We happened to that year have a change in the coaching philosophy. We had an assistant come in named Bob Walsh, who brought a lot of passing game ideas. So I say Harry and I were probably in the right place at the right time, because when the shift was made to throwing and catching, we had already practiced and had some success. So he was just an amazing athlete. He really was. And he could throw the feather touch pass. He could throw one that if you didn't catch it, it was going to, land in your chest. You'd catch it anyway. He'd throw it so hard. So he was, if I looked good, he was a big part of the reason why I did. Let's put it that way.
Casey Potts was as good a receiver as I've ever thrown the ball to, and I played some college football, and nobody was better than he was. So it made my job very easy. I just throw it up in the air, they'd catch it. He, Brian, I remember Paul Frangillo, my good friend Chris Hoft. And then on the line, we were huge across the line. I mean, huge by standards in those days. Well over 200 pounds across the line, which was big. I remember Bart Fessenden, and I'm going to forget a number of names, I'm sure. But and then prior years, I look back to think of Donnie Stone, who I didn't get to play with. He was the star of the football team when I was in 8th grade, and we all loved going to the games and hoping for a Dover Sherburne win eventually, which did happen in 67, I believe, was the first football win. But as far as oh boy, that's a tough question. There were so many good players in the teams back then.
Those are great football memories.
Very big. In the early going, there were some problems because we had some students that went down to one of their schools and painted their building just before the game. That led to some repercussions. When Jim Lorenzen was athletic director here, he recognized that, and he started a program where the captains of the Dover Sherburne team and the captains of the Medfield team used to meet and have breakfast at a school just prior to the game. One year the breakfast was held at Dover Sherburne, and next year the breakfast was held down in Medfield. And I think that went a long way in preventing more serious things from happening. But oh no, the Medfield Thanksgiving Day game went from a few hundred fans to thousands of fans, particularly when both of the teams were good.
It got to the point that there was a lot of vandalism the night before the Thanksgiving Day game. If we were playing in Medfield, we had people going over there and painting goalposts and so on and so forth. And then if we were hosting the game, we had a situation where Medfield kids were coming over, even to the point that they were painting on the building. And so based on that, I decided, along with the Medfield people, we needed to do something. And that's when we started having the breakfast with captains, coaches, and athletic directors. Not with the idea that it was the football players that were doing the damage, but as captains and players themselves, we needed them to become the leaders and to work with students, and it really became effective. And at the same time, we had a groundskeeper, Mr. Robert Yeard, who really liked working here. And again, as the groundskeeper, he was concerned about what was happening. And he even got to the point, I don't know if they still do it or not, but he would stencil helmets of the seniors on both sides with their number on it. and just doing things like that to try to cut down on the intensity of the rivalry. First year was 1974, and I retired from here in the year 2003. And of those 29 years, actually 23 of them, I was the athletic director. And the whole time, all 29 years, I also taught physical education.